I'm Dr. Daniel Halleck, and welcome to The Wild Conversation, where we make the best thinking in psychology, leadership, and organizational science accessible to leaders who are willing to learn and to edit for their sake and for the sake of others. Leadership is lonely. When things go well in our work or our world, we sometimes give leaders more credit than they deserve. More often, though, we don't give our best leaders enough appreciation or support for the ways that they absorb our pain or create possibilities for us. If you are leading right now in a place where the stakes are high, you need people around you who you can trust. People who will both have your back and point out your blind spots. I believe that while leadership is lonely, leaders don't need to be. Healthy leaders prioritize and realize meaningful, authentic relationships who stretch them, support them, and strategically position them. And it doesn't really matter what level of leadership you hold or what your industry is. It's critical to be surrounded with an intentional development network, a personal board of advisors. As humans, we're hardwired for connection. Research across psychology, social sciences, and even medicine underscores this. Social support is a foundational part of healthy and happy living, with links to longevity, mental health, or even thriving for newborns and babies. And leaders need connection too. In fact, I believe it's dangerous when leaders lead alone without people to support them. The challenge is that the very nature of the role of leader is isolating. Oftentimes, the expectations we have for leaders unintentionally set them up for failure. As a leader, people expect you to be a superhuman who's going to solve all their needs. There's a lot of tensions. People demand that you be hyper-connected and always available. At the same time, they expect you to model work-life balance and effective time management. You're asked to be authentic and transparent, candidly sharing your struggles and fears, but at the same time, staying positive, inspiring, and hopefully composed and anchored in the middle of storms where you don't really know what the outcome is going to be for you personally. Your team wants you to include people in decisions. That's great. At the same time, they also want you to be strong and decisive, casting and keeping a compelling vision without wavering back and forth. And if you rely too much on the perspective of others, they'll say you're not doing that. People want you to have bold convictions, but at the same time, they want you to be humble, willing to request and receive critical feedback. Leading is sort of an impossible task. It's full of tensions. And that's why having a personal board of advisors can be so critical. One of my deepest desires for the leaders that I get the opportunity to work with is that they can become leaders who last, leaders who stand the test of time. They don't burn out quickly. They don't give up because it's too difficult. One of the ways this happens is by surrounding leaders with what I call relational investors, people who are committed to helping you become successful now and far into the future. And it's your relational investors that make up your personal board of advisors. So where did the idea come from? What was the origin of the concept of a personal board of advisors? For decades, social scientists have been enamored with mentors and mentoring. But in 2011, two researchers, Monica Higgins and Kathy Cram, changed the game for the way we think about mentoring. They introduced a new concept called a development network, a constellation of mentors. Instead of one person, it gave people permission to think about a whole range of mentoring voices who provide different levels of value in different ways over different times. The fundamental principle is that we need different people for different reasons in different seasons. Different people for different reasons in different seasons. Today, most people call your development network your personal board of advisors. Organizations have advisory boards to steer their direction. Why can't leaders have personal advisory boards to steer their careers? That's the idea behind it. Your relational investors on your board are the people who are committed to investing in you and your growth. So I know some of you are thinking, okay, Daniel, I'm convinced. I like that idea of being a leader who lasts. I don't want to lead alone. I'd love to have support. Where do I start? Give me something practical. When I sit with a leader to build their personal board of advisors, I think of 3 categories of relational investors that we need. Relationships for stretch, support, and strategy. So let's look at each of these a little bit more closely. There is a lot of research that each of these matter for us. But as we look a little bit further, I want you to think about which one might matter most for you right now based on what's happening across your work or your life. So all of them matter, but pick one that might matter most for you right now. The first is stretch. We all need people who stretch us. This looks like feedback and people who challenge our perspective. When I think about feedback for the people who stretch us, they're relational investors who give you honest, challenging, yet still caring feedback. I think about feedback, I think about mirrors. These are the people who reflect back to you what you look like. They give you insight and information that increases your self-awareness and awareness of how others are perceiving you. We all need mirrors. A number of years ago, I was mapping out my personal board of advisors, and I had this realization that my wife, Kristen, was one of the only people I had who was giving me honest, challenging, yet caring feedback. And on the one hand, that's great. We have a great, trusting, open, honest relationship. On the other hand, it's kind of problematic because while she can offer that for me in critical areas, I don't bring her to work with me every day. And so I realized I was missing an incredible opportunity to understand how my actions were impacting other people. And so it spurred me to realize I need to recruit feedback partners who are willing to stretch me, let me know how I'm showing up, and I can go to and ask for feedback after a meeting or a presentation. So all of us need people who give us feedback to stretch us, but another half of that stretch is people who give us perspective. These are the type of relational investors who stimulate you to think in novel, innovative ways or see your world completely different than you had before. If the people who give you feedback are like a mirror, the people who give you the perspective advantage are like windows. They carry your gaze somewhere else. If you've ever sat in your favorite coffee shop or restaurant and by the window and you get to see some great, beautiful landscape or scenery, or you've been in an airplane and you get to fly over mountains or the ocean, you go, oh my gosh, look at that. That's what the perspective is like. It's going to challenge and stretch you, but not by giving you feedback, but by giving you a different vantage point on what you might be dealing with. It's a window that carries your gaze somewhere away from where you are right now. A number of years ago, we were working with a hospital foundation, and Beth, who was running that, one of the leaders running that foundation, said to us at the end of the engagement, you should start a foundation. Okay. Yeah, you could call it the WILD Foundation, Hold and Intentional Leader Development. Hospitals do it all the time. And there has to be so many leaders who need what you do, bringing systematic whole person leader development individually for their capacity or increasing the alignment of teams like you've done for us, but who don't have the funds to do it. And a foundation would allow you to engage with people who want to help provide that for mobilizing leaders who are going to put clean water in people's hands or fight human trafficking or invest in education and the next generation of leaders. So Beth planted a seed. She took our gaze further than we had thought and planted a seed with Dr. McKenna, our CEO and founder. And a number of years later, we decided we're going to launch that foundation. And now for 3 years, we've been able to use that mechanism to invest in leaders who deeply need a deeper leader development process and system, but might not have access to world-class coaching or assessments or tools. And so feedback and perspective are two of the ways that we can have people around us who stretch us to think about things we never considered. Then there's support. The first thing I go to is emotional support. Who are the relational investors you would call if your life or career were just crumbling? We need people to stretch us, but sometimes we need people to support us. The people who give us emotional support are like a safe harbor. A ship can weather a storm that's passing through. They might give you encouragement that helps you get back out and reminds you that things are eventually going to be okay. Or maybe they can't do that, but they let you know that even if things aren't going to be okay, you're not alone and you have somebody with you. They're the people you can vent to, you can process. In fact, they might not even say anything. They might just sit with you, and that might be enough. All of us need people who give us emotional support, and at different seasons, we might need it more than we had before. So who are those relational investors for you? Another angle to support is mentors. Some of us need people who give us emotional support. And by the way, that might be the same person who gives you tough feedback. It might not. These categories people can cross over, or they could be separate. Gives you permission to say, this person's really good for emotional support. This person's really good for challenging my thinking. So the other half of support is mentors. These are the relational investors you go to when you need important guidance on your life and career. A number of years ago, I got enamored with coaching, and I decided I'm going to start a coaching practice. This was my first coaching practice I started. Problem was I was 23 years old. Now, I know some of you are laughing, but at that time, coaching was a big deal, but it wasn't like today where there's a coach for how to water your plants or do your dishes. There wasn't a coach for everything. I know I'm being a little bit facetious, but we're in a coaching everything world today. But I got enamored with coaching, specifically career coaching. And I had a gentleman named Matt Youngquist who I met with, and he offered to mentor me. And what his mentoring did is it transformed the way that I served people. He walked me through how he developed and coached people in their careers and career transitions and making career changes and finding a job. He also gave me the behind the scenes of his business. He showed me how he wrote his invoices, how he put together programs. He even helped me position my brand. As a 23-year-old coach, he wisely said, if you brand yourself as a career coach, you're now competing with every executive coach out there, and you're either going to be dismissed or just ignored. So why don't you brand yourself as the young professionals coach? It was brilliant. I positioned myself as the go-to person for young professionals, millennials, Gen Y, or emerging leaders. And that's who I worked with. And now those people who could have been competitors actually became collaborators because they would refer clients to me who didn't quite fit where they needed, but they knew I could serve. And he wisely told me, as your clients grow, your audience will grow too. And today, many of those people are in senior leader roles and serving in executive functions. And Matt was right, but his mentoring guided me in an important part of my career. So we all need people who stretch us, those mirrors for feedback, those windows of perspective, and people who give us support, emotional support when things might feel like they're crumbling, and mentors to help guide us along the path. We need stretch, we need support, but we also need strategy. I first think about career connections, the relational investors you would call tomorrow if you were suddenly looking for a job. As you see people lose their jobs and post about it or talk about it, you start to realize, if you've ever been in that place or you are in that place, the feeling of having to make a shift, either by force or by choice, feels kind of like this. Yesterday, I was essential. Today, I'm expendable. Tomorrow is completely ambiguous. For most leaders, one of the most unsettling events that they experience in their careers are times of transition. And again, whether that be shifting to a new role or taking on the next level. And so who are the people you would call tomorrow? And that doesn't mean you need a job. Some of the most effective leaders are the ones who know that they have a network of support in place that they could go do anything, but they're choosing to be where they are with joy and a desire to serve the people who are in their care. So career connections are incredibly valuable, whether you are in that transition or it's coming around the corner for you. We need people who can help us with our strategy, and those career connections can be a bridge. And then lastly, I think of advocates. Who are the people, the relational investors who risk their reputation and put it on the line on your behalf? These are people who can open up doors for you. You've been trying to get through. You've been trying to get this position or make this happen for your business. They could be internal in your organization or outside. They can open up doors for you, or maybe they can kick down doors that you never thought you could get through. And some advocates even create new doors where you never knew a door could even exist. And then they help you walk through it. So we need people who stretch us, people who support us, and people who bring us strategy. Getting intentional about our relational investors for your personal board of advisors is one of the most important things you can do for your longevity and effectiveness as a leader. Because you need different people for different reasons in different seasons. Building your personal board of advisors is so important. It is often the missing ingredient when I look at corporate leadership development programs. As an aside, it's the one thing that almost never gets covered. But it's so important that we built an entire assessment in our Wild Toolkit devoted to helping leaders map out their relational infrastructure. We called the tool the Strategic Network Audit and Guide. And it's actually because of this tool and going through that process that I had the confidence to make a career move from an internal leader development person to an external leader development person when I joined Wild. Completely different worlds, completely different expectations and experiences. And for me to be able to complete that made me realize, yeah, I'm ready to make this shift, and I have people who are going to help me be successful as I do that. Getting surrounded by relational investors can help you last as a leader for your sake, but also for the sake of the people in your care. And by the way, if asking for help feels weird, or if you feel like this is a process of just manipulating and using people, then I delivered a TED Talk recently just for you. And I titled it, "If Networking Feels Gross, You're Doing It Wrong." So I invite you to watch it so you can learn the difference between showing up as a greedy transactional consumer versus a generous relational investor. But that's another wild conversation for a different time. If you want to be a leader who lasts, you need people around you. And building a personal advisory board is one of the ways to make that happen. So as you continue the conversation for yourself, here's 2 questions to consider. First, who are the most important relational investors in your life today? Who are they? How does their support make you a better leader? And 2, what do you need most in this season from your relational investors? Stretch, support, or strategy? And why? My invitation is that we can consider how to get surrounded by relational investors who help us become the leaders who last for our sake and for the sake of the people who we're called to care for. Let's continue the conversation.